Hey, 'tis the season to give the perfect gift. C60 Evo organic oil elixirs and facial serum sets. And here with another sleep tip is our good pal, Chris Burrows, co-founder and chief scientist at C60 Evo. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Richard, thank you so much for having me. My next tip regarding getting better sleep is related to electronic devices. So we all have these, this cell phone lying around, or we're using it on a regular basis. What a lot of people don't realize is that those devices give off blue light. That blue light is actually tells our bodies, the only time naturally that we see blue light is at the peak of the sun. So when the sun is up at its peak at noon. And so what those devices do, including your computer terminals, your cell phones, your tablets, is they convince our physiology that it's the middle of the day. You can imagine that if you're watching your cell phone or tablet at 10 p.m. and you've somehow convinced your physiology that it's the middle of the day, this is not good for sleep. So it's really important. Most devices have actually blue light blockers, and you can just go out and Google and how to blue light block on my Samsung device or Apple device, or even on your PC or your Mac. Make sure you turn that on. I know people who leave it on all day so that they're never impacted by that blue light. I would recommend 2 hours before the sun is setting in your local area to turn that on. Obviously, it doesn't work if you're working on videos or you're working on pictures, but try and turn that on 2 hours early. And the other thing regarding electronic devices, try to keep them out of the bedroom. I recommend that you actually put a charging station outside of your bedroom so that you just don't even bring it in your bedroom. These devices, as we've kind of been reading and hearing, are like geared to trigger our endorphin responses, and so we like to be on them. They keep them up, so keep it out of the bedroom and make sure you got your blue light blocker on about 2 hours before the sun sets. And I always like sharing sleep tips because our most consistent testimonial for our product is that people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night.
C60 Evo products deliver noticeable benefits to people and pets around the world. Immunity boost, deeper sleep, just like Chris said, more energy, mental balance, flexibility, and longevity. Please visit the website c60evo.com/Richard-Serrett. And don't forget, use the coupon code EVRS at checkout, EVRS at checkout, and then you save an extra 10%. That can't wait. All right, Chris, we'll talk again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Serrett's Strange Planet, following the truth wherever it leads, exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites, revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs, here's Richard.
Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
And to the audio Emporium. Come on in, weary. Hang your cloak, egg, grab a stool, and come by the fire. And once again, I'm hearing an echo. Not sure why. Carlos Cagina is our technical producer. Ryan White is our live stream producer. Check out my YouTube Rumble channels, Strange Planet, and don't forget to subscribe. Family therapist and expert on the phenomenon of near-death experiences and shared death experiences is here. And an SDE, if you're not familiar, is where one feels that one has participated in a dying person's transition to a post-mortem existence. William Peters founded the Shared Crossing Project to raise awareness about the profound and healing experiences that are possible for the dying and their loved ones at the end of life. He's a marriage and family therapist at the Family Therapy Institute of Santa Barbara. He holds a Master's of Education with a focus in group dynamics from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And William directs the Shared Crossing Research Initiative, the first research-based program designed to examine the causes and strategies for enabling the shared death experience. William served as a hospice volunteer with the Zen Hospice Project at Laguna Honda Hospital in San Francisco. He has had 2 near-death experiences and a variety of SDEs that inform his work. He also leads the Shared Crossing Pathway Program, Life Beyond Death Groups, and the new Shared Crossing Concept Group for end-of-life professionals. As a psychotherapist, he specializes in end-of-life and bereavement counseling and past life regression therapy. He's the author of At Heaven's Door. William, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, Richard. Really wonderful to be with you this evening.
Likewise. Let's begin at the beginning. Your first shared death experience when you were working as a volunteer in a hospice.
Yeah, so here I am, just doing my hospice volunteer work, as you noted, at Laguna Honda Hospital in San Francisco. This is a large public hospital, old structure. So you can imagine 24-bed open ward hospice. So just think curtains, no separate bed, no separate wall, no walls separating the rooms, anything like that. And the reason I share that is because you have, this is also a hospice that's treating indigent people. So the turnover is really high. So you can imagine people that are homeless, people that are really on the edge, people that go into a hospital but don't have any insurance, and as they're getting close to death, the hospital ship them over to the hospice. So there's a high turnover of patients in the hospice ward, which basically means patients are coming in, staying, a few days in most cases, and dying. And what that means for those of us as volunteers, certainly this is now going back a couple decades. I don't know how it is now in this hospice ward, but in those days, we would have people dying pretty much, on a regular basis during our shifts. And so for me, on this particular afternoon, I'd actually been working with, we'll call him Ron, not just a pseudonym. Ron had been unresponsive for a number of days. And in Ron's case, he'd been in this hospice for about certainly 3 weeks or so. So I had really actually developed a relationship with him as best you can. Like I said, he was unresponsive for the last part of this. And when I say unresponsive, that means he is not responding to any, conversational cues. Basically, he looks like he's sleeping all the time. But as we know in hospice work, the last sense to go away or to die essentially is hearing. So we have, as hospice workers, our practice is to always announce what we're doing, even though it looks like our patients are sleeping. So we'll say, hey, Ron, I'm here. I want to know that I'm going to sit down and read a book for you, and we're going to go back and read Call of the Wild by Jack London. We stopped, with, chapter 3 last time. I'm going to pick it up there. So here I am. This is the routine. So I'm reading Call of the Wild, as I had done many afternoons with Ron, and in the middle of this reading, I just pop out of my body. Here I am. I'm now above my body, suspended above my body, not that far. I can see the crown of my head. I can actually see the book. I can't quite see the words in the book, but I can certainly see the lines in the book, if you will. And I can see Ron, from now above, no difference, unresponsive, prone in his bed. But to my right is Ron. Ron, I can see his face. I can see his eyes glowing with aliveness and vitality, which is in stark contrast to his unresponsive body down below in the bed. And he's got a big smile on his face. And he's energetic. And he is communicating with me saying, check this out. This is where I have been. And I'm just taking this in going, whoa. Now, I'd had a couple of near-death experiences previous to this, and I did have a shared death experience, but not to this magnitude, or not with this much clarity and crispness previous. in this
How
case,
is he? Excuse me, William. How is he communicating with you?
Oh, yeah, so it was all telepathic. I mean, it wasn't like he was moving his voice, moving his mouth. But it was just, he was communicating clearly to me, in the sense that I knew that he knew I was there. He was kind of happy that I was there. And I got the sense he was showing me that this is where he was. Now, I will say there are some types of communication I've had in this space that are a lot clearer in terms of like why, questions or responses or direct messages. In this case, it was just clear that he knew I was there, and I seemed to, I think, more on the level of intuiting, but quite strongly, that he was happy that I was to show me this. But it wasn't like a direct messaging, and I will say, in most of the shared death experiences that I have had myself and our research, there's a clear sense of communication where the experiencer will say, I just knew. I mean, I knew as clear as I'm talking to you now. So this was a little less like that, and I can't really say why. It just was.
And did William look like, was it the same sort of indigent, sickly Ron that you were seeing that was lying in the bed, or was this a more youthful, healthy-looking Ron?
That's a great question, and this is something we see in our research almost all the time when the shared death experiencers report seeing the deceased, or seeing the dying or any other deceased in the afterlife. They tend, and I'd say with Ron, which is consistent with research, Ron looked vital, healthy, alive. He looked a little bit younger, but not like super youthful. And some of the research we see is that especially when you see the deceased loved ones who greet the dying as the dying, transition into the afterlife, the deceased loved ones typically look a lot younger, a lot healthier. They almost look like they're in the prime of their life. In this case with Ron, he looked healthier for sure. Like I said, his eyes were bright and light shining through, but he didn't look like, Ron was probably in his 70s. He might have looked like he was a healthy, vital man in his 60s. But in most cases, when the research, now we have over 250 deeply analyzed cases, what we see is somebody who died, whether 70, 80, 90, whatever, they may show up in their 20s, in their 30s, usually at their prime, and sporting an outfit that was probably an activity or presentation that they're most proud of.
And when this shared death experience happened, did that happen at the moment that his spirit or soul left his body?
So this is another great question here. So in this case, Ron died a day or two later, and we have found in our research that 23% of shared death experiences happen hours or days either before or after the medically defined time of death. Of course, medically defined time of death would be cessation of brain activity and or heartbeat stopping. So in this case, like I said, I think a day or two, this SDE happened a day or two before Ron died. And I will be really clear and say that happens in 9% of our cases. We have early SDEs, and then 13% happen after, a death a day and hours or days later. But the way we know this is an SDE rather than, say, a pre-death dream or vision or post-death dream or vision is because of the pattern. And the pattern we look for in the SDE is this, that there's some sense of a journey. There's also these NDE qualities, like near-death experience qualities. And the piece we see, is that strong bond between the experiencer and the participant, the person dying. Now, in this case with Ron, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute. you didn't have that strong of a bond. Well, as it turns out, I actually did have a really strong bond with Ron, because he had no loved ones. He was indigent, and I had been with him a few days, more than a few days actually, up for a week and a half, and there was a bond even before he became unconscious, if you will. I'd already had a relationship with him, joking, talking about his life. So I might have been, at the end of his life, one of his closest relations. And the other thing, the journey motif is not as active in Ron's case as we see in other cases. But with Ron, which is so interesting, is that this is the very beginning of his journey. Because he was communicating to me, this is where I have been. This is where I've been hanging out. But I also got a sense in what he was saying to me was, this is where I'm going, and I'm kind of titrating back and forth between being in that physical body and being here. So he's talking about the initial stages of journey. Not as pronounced as you see in most SDEs, but certainly enough to be radically different than a dream visitation, than a vision or visitation pre or post-death, because in those, there's a completely different agenda.
So when you're looking at Ron and you're hovering above your body, he's hovering above his body, did you get a glimpse in and around Ron? I mean, where was he? Where were you? I mean, I know you were above your body, but where did you go?
Great. Yeah. So this is what we call a co-experienced out-of-body experience. So we call it a co-OBE, two persons sharing an out-of-body experience together. I was clearly in a parallel universe, in the sense that here I am with Ron, and I have this ability, as I explained before, to see my body and his body down below. I even see myself reading down below. Best I can tell, I couldn't see my mouth moving, but best I could tell, I did not stop reading there. So parallel universe happening, concurrently, and I just think, I'm just in that same space, if you will. It's a large room, but I'm up elevated, so I'm up near the ceiling, and I'm with Ron. But I'll tell you, as I'm looking at Ron has kind of darkness around him. It's not, I'm not seeing him like he's in that space, if you will. Like, I'm not seeing the ceiling. If I was looking through him, I'm not seeing other hospital, none of the other physical features of that hospital. I'm just seeing darkness behind him. So as I'm looking at him, he's in a different realm. But I seem to be kind of above my body in this realm, but I can also see the human realm as well. So, great question. That's just the best I can make of it. It's almost like I'm I'm in this other realm, but I'm kind of like, it feels like Ron is more into it because he doesn't have any of the physical trappings of the hospital.
When you're having that shared death experience, either you or in any of the other, as you mentioned, 250 in-depth analyzed cases, do you as a participant feel the same pull to go wherever he's going? Like, I don't want to go back to my body. I want to go with this person.
Yeah, that's great. You're tapping into something there, Richard, that, as you know from the near-death experience literature, most near-death experiencers, when they're in that space, in the NDE space, don't want to return. In this case, with Ron, I'm enjoying myself up there, but I'm actually just with him, and I don't have any preference. I don't seem to have any choice, in sense, like, it's not like I'm saying I want to stay here or I want to don't want to go back to my body, or I do want to go back to my body. It's just kind of like I was there, and then that space just ended. That experience just ended. It wasn't a particularly long time, I will say that. Some SDEs are very long. At least, time-space continuum is hard to, it's not the same, but, and the 250 plus cases, most SDEers do not express a desire to stay there, nor do they express a strong desire to go back to their life, human life. It's as if they're along for this journey, they're in it fully, they're observing it, and then all of a sudden they realize either they're back in their physical body or they come to a boundary. Typically, there are many ways to see a boundary or border to which they respond with, oh my gosh, I can't go any further. And then they realize they're back in their body. The minute they realize there's a boundary, they're pretty much back in their body. So there are some significant differences between the SDE experience and the NDE experience in that regard. Yeah, I think I hope I answered that well enough, Richard.
Yes, absolutely. So I get the sense it's not as profound an experience for someone as an NDE.
Well, I would say that's not the correct language, because I think it's as profound. I think it's a very similar phenomena in terms of a very similar experience in terms of phenomenological features, like there are you see the out-of-body experience. You can go into heavenly realms. You can have a life review. Yourself, you can have a life review. You can share in the dying person's life review. You can have a review of your time together with the dying and yourself, your kind of shared life review. You can see the boundary. You can see deceased loved ones, a welcoming party. You can see elevated beings. All of this, angels is often referred to in this realm. It's very similar phenomenologically to the NDE. The difference is, I think there's some, in the NDE, there's always that question of, will I return to this life or will I not? That's a difference in the NDE. In the literature, I know in the literature, and Rich, I know you're up on this, is that some NDEers don't want to come back to their human lives.
Right.
Very few actually express a desire to go back to their human lives, even if they have families and such. Some do, but very few. And so, but there is that kind of negotiation with the forces that be over there. Usually it's defined as the light, because in 75% of NDEs, there's a dominant numinous light that they're kind of realizing is in charge of this, maybe the source or God or whatever your spiritual tradition might ascribe to that force being. But it is in charge, and they're negotiating with that light. In the SDE, there's really no sense of negotiation, because there's no sense in the SDE experiencer that they have a choice here. Like, they don't feel like they're dying. In an NDE, there's a sense that that they know that they're out of their body, they've left their body, their life has been threatened in some way. And in the SDE, that's not it. The SDE has a very observational view. You're a spectator for a profound experience that can be every bit as profound as an NDE. It's just not on the table, this question of, will you return to your body or will you not? Will you essentially die and go into the afterlife or not? That doesn't seem to arise for SDE experiencers. We don't have that. There is a fear sometimes initially when they feel a pull on their body saying, I don't want to die. But once they get through that pull and they realize what they've been asked or what they've been made privy to, which is sharing in the journey typically of a loved one who's dying or transitioning, once they realize that's the frame, the question about their terminalness, if you will, and not returning to their human life is off the table.
All right, William, we'll take a quick time out, come back and discuss further. William Peters, founder of the Shared Crossing Project, sharedcrossing.com. We'll tell you about an online course as well. Stay with us.
Loose lips sink ships.
Hey there, I'm hard at work on another edition of Inner Sanctum, my free monthly newsletter. Inner Sanctum features my monthly brief, a column of my thoughts and opinions on what's happening in the world. It features a spotlight on a past guest, a look ahead to an upcoming episode of my weekly syndicated radio program, The Conspiracy Show. It features a look at this month in conspiracy and UFO history, and my Conspiracy Unlimited podcast episode pick of the month, and so much more. To get your free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, delivered to your email inbox, just go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on Inner Sanctum and register. It's fast, easy, and again, absolutely free.
This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Follow Richard on Twitter at Richard Syrett. For show information, visit the website strangeplanet.ca.
416-360-0740 or toll free 1-866-740-4740.
William Peters is with us, founder of the Shared Crossing Project, and tell us about the this online program that's happening Wednesday, starting April 27th, William.
Oh, yeah. So we have a course. We moved all of our programs online during COVID. And actually, it took us a while to actually move our programs into this format because we traditionally, our programs, just to go back a step, our programs are really to raise awareness and educate people about not just shared death experiences, but the whole host of other end-of-life experiences. And the reason we want to do that is because we find when people know about these experiences, it does a few things. One is it really allows them to be more curious, receptive, and at peace about this process of death and dying. So we call these courses, we have a variety of courses. The one that we have coming up right now is I think it's called Waking Up to the SDE and the Power of Love and Life. And that course really is, it is the first course actually ever taught, either in real time or online or in person, what have you, that's dedicated to 10.5 hours of exploration and definition around the shared death experience. And we'll talk about the patterns, the typologies. These are understandings that I've developed now over, a couple of decades of really studying these experiences, and really give people a map of how these experiences work and how you can make them happen, and some key features that are just so wonderful to know about. This feature, one is this notion of a conductor, which is I am increasingly feeling like there is a force that is in charge of managing the transition of souls or spirits or consciousnesses within the human body from that human existence into the afterlife. And sometimes you see that conductor represented in a form of an angel or a spirit guide or an elevated being of some type. And sometimes you just feel and sense it. But like I'm saying, this course online, which starts the end of, I think it's the last Thursday in April, we'll meet 7 times for 90 minutes. It's, I will show lots of videos of firsthand accounts from our research of people talking about their experiences. I'll analyze them, break them down, tell you what's so important about them, and then eventually, teach people, what are the means to have these experiences. And we've done a good deal of research on that, although I will say, as much as we're learning about the SDE first, my institute, the Shared Crossing Research Initiative, is the first institute ever to dedicate itself to studying the shared death experience. So this is very, very nascent research. It's groundbreaking. It's been featured in the American Journal of Hospice and Palliative Medicine, which is one of the most respected hospice and palliative care journals, in existence. So people know these experiences are out there. Experts know they're out there. It's just that we're the first organization to really, really break it down, categorize it, give people a map for how to deal with it. So another thing about this course, which is great, is you'll get an opportunity to do a lot of experiential exercises, group dynamics, group exercises, where you'll meet other people who are interested in not just the shared death experience, but also becoming conscious about what is possible and how you can craft the best end-of-life experience for you and your loved ones.
So,
I think my thing, Richard.
Yeah.
I would like to extend to all of your listeners a 10% discount off of this. So if you go there, if you're interested, you can see the course and just type in all caps Shared Crossing 10. Shared Crossing 10. So yeah, as Richard and we've talked before, I think I really love your shows. I love the sophistication and thoughtfulness you bring to your interview. So to me, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to extend that to your audience because I assume they'll be great people for our community, and I want to encourage them to consider that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know my listeners do as well. And sharedcrossing.com is the website, sharedcrossing.com. And again, that course, it's Wednesdays, 5 to 6:30 p.m. That's Pacific Coast time, April 27th to June 8th.
It's Wednesdays. Yeah.
Yes, Wednesdays. So getting back to Ron, the patient that we were talking about at the Laguna Honda Hospice in San Francisco. And after your shared death experience, he died the next day. Were you with him at the moment of death?
I was not. I was aware that he died because I got notification that he had died, but I was not with him.
And when you're at a distance from a dying patient, does the intensity or the nature of the experience, the shared death experience, change depending on your proximity?
Yeah. So this is a major breakthrough in our research, and that is that previous research was really more based on people sending in firsthand accounts to different researchers studying end-of-life phenomena more generally. So there's DOPS, Department of Perceptual Studies, University of Virginia, great group of researchers, Bruce Grayson and others there, and then Raymond Moody as well. They received a lot. Raymond in particular wrote the first book on the SDE. In fact, he popularized the term shared death experience with his 2010 book, Glimpses of Eternity. But all of these accounts previously had been at the bedside, and there was no real appreciation for these remote SDEs. And when we say remote SDE, what we mean is that the experiencer is not in the room. Like, they could be down the hall, they could be in the kitchen, they could be somewhere else in the house, they could be across town, or they can be across the globe somewhere. What we found is that there is very little difference between a remote SDE and a bedside SDE. And something else is 64% of our accounts ended up being remote. And we were stunned by that. But what we found is the more we started talking and I started lecturing about remote SDEs, all of a sudden people started realizing, wait a minute, when my loved one died, I had a similar experience, but it wasn't until I heard you lecture on it that I actually remembered the depth of it. And usually the remote SDEs will happen, in some proximity to similar to I just said before. Remote, obviously, a bedside SDE or a remote SDE, you might think at a bedside you'd have the SDE at the same time. Not necessarily. There's a lot of people that are at bedside and then before, just moments before or after, or hours before and after, same time, relationship. In other words, 9% can happen hours or days before, and 13% can happen hours or days after the actual medically determined time of death. So, no difference between remotes and bedside. No significant differences. Obviously, some things at the bedside, for example, at the bedside, you may actually see what we call spirit leaving body. You may actually see the spirit, consciousness, soul, whatever you want to call it, departing from the body. It often leaves from the chest area, the heart area, third eye, crown. It, leaves heading upwards. It looks like a kind of a ghostly, translucent membrane, sometimes shaped like the human body, sometimes not. And then it tends to go up to the roof, to the ceiling. It pauses there, moves around. Sometimes there's some communication between this. Now I'm going to call it a spirit being that's no longer incarnated. A lot of times in our research, the experiencer, especially the loved one, will talk about a final communication with that spirit who has just left the body. And it's usually a thank you, I love you, goodbye type conversation. And then it goes. Now, so the reason I went into that was because that's not an experience that you're going to have remotely. That's not an SDE feature that you're going to experience unless you're at bedside.
Okay, we'll pick up on that point. Excuse me, William. On the other side, we'll take another quick timeout. William Peters, founder of the Shared Crossing Project, sharedcrossing.com, the website. Back with more of our conversation right after these.
Peering into the shadows, where the truth often
I don't need to tell you how important building and sustaining a healthy immune system is these days. And just in time, my good friends at Get the Tea are offering a special package called the Immune Builder. You get 1 month's supply of Life Change Super Tea. That's 8 bags. 1 bottle of Bioastin. That's 75 capsules. Now, Bioastin, or astaxanthin, is known as one of nature's most powerful antioxidants and provides a wide range of impressive health benefits. The Immune Builder also includes 1 bottle of Potent C Wild Alaskan Sockeye Omegas. That's 90 gel caps. And 1 copy of the book Natural Astaxanthin, Hawaii's Super Nutrient by Dr. William Sears. There's so much more than tea at getthetea.com. Get your Immune Builder right now. Not available in any store. Use the code UNLIMITED and all your purchases ship for free. The Immune Builder from getthetea.com.
The truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Free stage. Access storage. Try 4 weeks free. Details at accessstorage.ca.
416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
William Peters is a pioneer in the field of shared death experiences, founder of the Shared Crossing Project, and the author of At Heaven's Door. And I wanted to ask you about whether more than one person can have a shared death experience with the dying individual at the same time. So if, let's say, there's a person and there are maybe half a dozen children that have that special bond with that individual, could they all have that shared death experience at the same time? Has that been documented?
Yes, it is possible for. You gave an example of half a dozen children. If, they could all have it, even if they were not all at bedside or they were all remote, it wouldn't make a difference. We have seen some cases like that, not a lot. It seems like some people some loved ones, if you will have the experience and others will not. And this can be a cause for some stress or dissonance, if you will. But in the research, we find that about 11% of all SDE cases are multi-person, more than one. And we have seen that at the bedside, for example, thinking of a case here that's pretty typical, you have a grandmother dying. I say grandmother because there's a grandson there, and then actually the daughter of the mother. So you've got 3 generations, grandmother, mother, and grandson present. And the mother reports seeing light coming into the room and a cylinder of light, and then her mother traveling up that light and looking back and saying essentially, "Thank you, I love you, I need to be going." And the grandson reports seeing the light, and then reports seeing his grandfather, but doesn't report seeing the grandmother. Reports, who's dying, of course, reports sensing the grandmother, but not really seeing. What he's really seeing is part of the greeting party, which is his deceased grandfather, obviously the husband of the grandmother who's dying currently. And these are mysteries. I mean, these are like, wow, why is it like that? And yet, in our research, we see that the shared death experiencers, when there's multi-person experiences, have some similar phenomena, but some experience different phenomena or features, and we don't know why that is. I mean, there's some question as to whether people have different, for lack of a better term, psychic gifts, intuitive gifts, whatever you want to call them. But it's still, that would be really, I would not assert that as truth, more as a question, that as I've done more and more research, I think there's something else going on rather than just psychic gifts being exercised.
Right. You mentioned that could cause some rifts perhaps in a family. Like, why did Granddad come to you and not to me? And why didn't I get to participate in the shared death experience? Didn't he love me as much? How do you resolve that? What do you tell people, or how do you help people who have that I don't know, regret or tension that they weren't part of it?
I mean, I'm a family therapist, so when I see this arise, what I do typically is I bring the family together as soon as I can, and to sit down and say, all right, let's talk about all of our experiences. And to cut to the chase on this, what we typically find is that, first of all, it seems pretty clear that the dying doesn't seem to have the capacity to visit everybody. Now, there are some cases where we see that the deceased, that the dying, the transitioning, visits dozens of people, and even offers all synchronistic events, if you will, things like maybe I'm trying to think of a good one. Like everybody sees something in the room change, like the clock radio freezes at the time of her birth date or an anniversary date, and everybody sees that. And so in those situations, it's obviously not an issue. Everyone sees it. But the reason I was sharing that is because it's, in some cases, the dying can make multiple visits to people and does. But that's more the rarity. What seems to be happening is that a person or two or three in a family will have an experience, a shared death experience. And then you circle the people up and say, let's talk about this. So the first thing I do is I normalize and say, this is very common, more common than not, that some people get the experience and others don't. So it seems to me I can explain, I don't know why this is, but this happens. And it's not like these people it seems to me that the dying have limited capacity to get to everybody. Like they just can't do it. And I don't know why that is, but that just seems to be the case. But when you have the conversations with the family, typically what happens is the family works it out, talks about what their issues are, their upsets are, because someone might feel like, I'm thinking of a story. This is really classic. A man I had trained with his mother who was dying of ovarian cancer. I trained them in the shared death experience protocols, which are these protocols to enable the SDE. Well, at the time of death, the son, call him Frank is in the kitchen making funeral plans, But Frank has been with his mother, preparing for her death, taking care of her for the last year plus. Well, his sister had just come down from Oregon, and she had 2 kids that she left in Oregon and had not seen her mother in like a year. So she's there. She's been there a week. She's leaving the next day. The mother goes into an active dying process, and she dies and gives, I say gives as if the dying is able to give the SDE. We don't know that, but it certainly feels that way. But in this experience, this person, call her Meg sees her uncle, her mother's brother, enter into the room. He's a big man. He had been in the Navy, and looks at her and says, "I've got it. I've got your mom. She's coming with me." And Meg is like, "Whoa, this is incredible! This, there it is. Her beloved brother
that's
here."
The welcoming party. William, I'm sorry, pardon the interruption. This was a short segment. We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. William Peters, founder of the Shared Crossing Project, back with more of our discussion in mere moments. Stay with us.
Fasten your seatbelt and put your tray in the upright position. You're about to leave everything you know. This is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett on Zoomer Radio.
William Peters, Shared Crossing Project. So we were talking about this woman dying of ovarian cancer. The one son had spent basically a year taking care of her. Another daughter was not able to be there with her that often, but she had a glimpse or caught a glimpse of what you call the welcoming party for the person that was about to cross over. She saw her uncle, this great big burly man, I think, and someone else.
Well, in this case, it wasn't just a welcoming party. It was a welcoming party, but it was the conductor, this force that seems to enter into the SDE or appear in the SDEs. We see this. I mean, we're doing the data on this right now because I've really been fascinated by this feature of the conductor, that force that seems to be facilitating the transition of souls from human existences into the afterlife. And in this case, it was Meg's uncle, her mother's brother. They were very close. And so Meg has this profound experience of seeing her mother being drawn out of her physical body, that spirit soul translucent, and she described this as, her mother's spirit that looked like her body, if you will, being pulled out and then going into the arms of her beloved uncle, and the uncle, ushering her away, pulling her away, holding her, and then rising out through a cylinder of light out of the room. And she gets this sense, as Meg says, "Oh my gosh, I mean, my mother is dead, no longer here, but she's in good hands." It's very comforting. It's mind blowing. All the euphoric feelings that are common with the SDE, she's experiencing. And then she goes and shares it with her brother, Frank, and Frank's like, "Wow, that's great," but he's thinking, I trained, with William and Shared Crossing Project to have this experience with my mother, and she gets it. So
I spent a year caring for her. Why didn't she come to me? Why didn't I get to see that?
Exactly. Very human, very human. Like, why couldn't you just come to me? I was just one room over. So these are all the mysteries. I don't know why she couldn't, but like I said before, it seems to be there's some limitations on the capacity that the dying have to bestow the shared death experience on loved ones. But in this case, Frank and I worked it. His sister went home, and she was grateful. And then Frank was really glad his sister had the experience. But he did say to me, like, that's really weird. I mean, and then as we worked through it, he realized, well, I had a great end of life with my mom, and Meg didn't. And I'm glad she got that experience because she really needed it more than I did, and because she felt bad she couldn't be there. So in some way, there's some sort of, for lack of a better term, divine justice and who gets the experience. It seems like the loved one that may need it the most gets it. And for Frank, later on, his mother actually visited him in a post-death visitation which was spectacular for him. And so he felt like, oh, wow, I didn't get the SDE, but a few months later, my mom came to me and showed me where she was, and it just was like, great. So, and we see that a lot. About 41% of our SDE experiencers, well, that's different. He wasn't an SDE experiencer, but he trained for it. I should say that statistic differently. Then a lot of people that do our trainings, upwards of 80%, will have some phenomena that's profound, either SDE or post-death dream, post-death vision or visitation, or some profound synchronicity that lets them know that their loved one is alive and well in a good place.
Can you have a shared death experience with somebody who actually, they have an NDE, but they come back?
Yes, that is a great question, and my immediate response to that is yes, it's possible. And I can tell you I've had a couple of those in my clinical practice. I've never had those in the research to date. My sense is we're going to get them, because I have had that question before, Richard, and it's a brilliant question. And I can tell you that I put everything I know about this experience, I'd say everything I know would lead me to see absolutely. Because really what this is accessing the space that the person, the departed person, or in the NDE, the person having the brush with death, it's just that ability for a loved one to connect with them where they are. So I know it's possible. I've had cases on it. Not a lot. In my clinical practice, I had 2 that I can remember offhand right now, and maybe a third that I can't really recall. But I'm sure they're out there.
I don't know if this is, we're maybe getting into the realm of total speculation, but or if this is something you've looked at, but I'm curious as to what extent the shared death experience has become sort of misidentified or sort of confused with what we might refer to as a haunting, or a sighting of a ghost and so forth. Did they get jumbled together, do you think?
I don't hear that very much. And one of the reasons I don't hear that, and it's not in the research, is because these experiences are typically pretty clear. The descriptions that I've heard and my team has heard are that, that experience was more real than real. Everything was hyper alive. It was more real than my human existence. I know there's an afterlife. It's not just a belief. I've been there. That's the ultimate reality. The human experience is the dream. So there's not that haziness that I think you were alluding to around, ghosts and things like that. I think ghosts, that's a different phenomenon altogether, which, I think you're pretty up on this. There's certainly a good deal of research, quality research, going back to the Society for Psychical Research out of Great Britain, beginning in the late 1880s, that cited all sorts of apparitions. Most of them, not most of them, but the highest frequency around death, and ghosts are certainly included in that.
Do any of these 250 plus case studies, does anyone report having a lengthy telepathic conversation with the dying individual, where they were able to ask them questions like, where are you? What does it look like? Who else did you see?
Yes to the first part of that question, lengthy SDEs. Yeah, there we have experiences where the dying seemingly take the experiencer on a journey of the cosmos in a certain way. And in some of those cases, it's as if the dying or the departing are trying to impart some sort of knowledge to the experiencer that typically has something to do with the metaphysics of things, like, the existence you're in is a school, or just do the best you can till you get here, or it's all about love. You do see a good deal of, teachings on the kind of the perennial wisdom, if you will. Love your neighbor as yourself. Be kind. The materialism doesn't matter. There's a fair amount of implicit teaching. But in terms of, you had a second part to your question there, Richard, that I'm not quite remembering.
Oh, I was just the nature of the conversation or the nature of the question. So, for example, if you were sitting beside a dying patient in a hospice and you had this SDE, and would you ask, be able to ask them, what does it look like where you are? What is it, who else did you see on the other side? These sorts of questions, detailed questions.
Yeah. So in those cases, that would presume that you had an early SDE with the person. And we don't have, most early SDEs happen with patients, the dying, not exclusively, but most of them, when they're unresponsive. In other words, there's no capacity for communication left. Now, in terms of conversations between the transitioning, the dying in the SDE and the experiencer, there is some communication, but most of it is not to the level that you just asked, like, where are you? And I think there's a reason for that. And the reason that I would posit is that when you're in that state, that dimension, what we hear all the time is, in that space, I had answers to all my questions. Anything I asked, I would have an answer for. In fact, I didn't even have to ask questions. I already knew everything. I knew the meaning of the universe. I knew the purpose of a human life. I knew, all sorts of things about the nature of reality. That, when I return to my human existence, I kind of have some knowing about this, but the specifics are no longer there. In other words, we would call this state-specific information or knowledge or wisdom.
All right, William, got to jump in. We're approaching the top of the hour. When we come back, we'll take some questions from the YouTube live chat, and my live stream producer Ryan will curate those for me and send those along, and I'll read them over the air. William Peters stays with us, founder of the Shared Crossing Project, as we head on into hour 2. Stay with us.
Richard Syrett's Strange Planet, following the truth wherever it leads, exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites, revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality, coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
With Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio.
And thanks for inviting me into your home, your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed basement with a simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. William Peters, a pioneer in the field of shared death experiences, stays with us, founder of the Shared Crossing Project and author of At Heaven's Door. And we'll remind you again, if you go to sharedcrossing.com, sharedcrossing.com, and you can sign up for the it's a 7-module live online course, Wednesdays, beginning April 27th to June the 8th. Again, sharedcrossing.com. And what is the code that my listeners can use for a 10% discount?
Shared Crossing, that's all caps, then the number 10 for 10% off.
Shared Crossing, all in caps, and then the number 10. All right. let's kind of reset because this is hour 2, and there may be some people just joining the program. Give us the definition for a shared death experience, or SDE.
Yeah, so a shared death experience occurs when somebody dies and a loved one, caregiver, and in some cases a bystander reports that they feel like they shared in the dying person's transition from their human existence in their human body into an afterlife. And this is typically the phenomena, or these phenomena that in our culture we relate to as near-death experience phenomena. So out-of-body experiences, visionary realms, heavenly realms, past life reviews of either the dying or your time together with the dying. There's light is a big feature of this. You're often traveling in a cylinder of light or towards a big luminous light, and you see deceased loved ones as a greeting party, elevated beings of all types. They can appear as angels or light beings, spirit guides, what have you. Oh, and of course, the most common phenomena is that the experiencer, surviving loved one or caregiver, reports seeing the dying in this transition. So they're moving along with them in many of these cases as they progress, typically heading upwards in their journeys into this afterlife.
You were a hospice volunteer. You mentioned, obviously doctors, nurses, first responders. Let's say, for example, a firefighter with the jaws of life trying to get at a car accident victim. Do they, on occasion, also experience an SDE?
Yes, they do. And this is one of the focus points of the Shared Crossing Project, and that is advocacy for the knowledge of these experiences for first responders of all kinds, because there are a few studies out there that talk about spiritual experiences for first responders where they feel like the spirit of the deceased came to them and they somehow didn't know how to make sense of it, and it kind of freaked them out. And yes, so in my experience when I've worked with first responders in this regards is by teaching them about the shared death experience and the various phenomena, the first responders have these aha moments like, oh, wait a minute, I was just with them. That makes sense. It's like, oh, I can let it go. I thought that somehow there was something weird about this, and that, so yes, first responders have these, and they need education and support around this so they don't feel like they're being freaked out by a wayward spirit. And I will say that these cultures, this is by the expressions of the first responders we've interviewed, is that in some of these cultures, it's not really, shall we say, professionally acceptable to share about these experiences. So we're trying to change that because we want people to know, first responders and others, to know these experiences happen. They're actually, more common than we know, and you may be gifted by someone dying coming to you to appreciate you or show you the other side, or perhaps even deliver a message to a loved one, especially if it's a first responder dealing with a sudden, unexpected, tragic death. You may be the last person they communicate with in this way.
We know that people that have near-death experiences and come back, oftentimes that just changes the trajectory of their life, forever. Has such a profound impact. Sometimes I've read there have actually been physical changes in that person. In other words, they look different when they come back, and their life is never the same. And the things that they were interested in, they leave all of that behind. Sometimes it can be the end of relationships because those two people they're strangers now. What about the person that has the shared death experience? Can it have that kind of long-lasting impact? Can it totally irrevocably change the trajectory of their life and who they are as a person?
Yeah, I guess is a wonderful question, and you just to affirm what you just the research you cited for the near-death experiences, of which I've had 2 near-death experiences. Yes, the profoundness of the near-death experience is significant, and the changes, transformations you identified are well known amongst us who research at the NDEs. In the shared death experience, we don't see that, what I would call challenge in coming back to your life and the need to, primary relationships don't seem to be as challenged. I think there are significant transformations, and this is important because these transformations are typically invitational in the sense that we do see SDE experiences coming back and saying things like, I now know the purpose of the human life generally, and I now understand that I have a purpose here during my lifetime, and I'm either going to, I know what it is, I'm going to get about living it right now and make significant changes, or they're going to commit themselves to finding out, or searching, if you will, for a higher calling in their life. But to be clear, unlike the near-death experience, we don't seem at this point. Now, when we do more research on this, I could take back these words I'm speaking right now. But it seems like shared death experiences, perhaps because they're witnesses to these experiences, they're witnessing a dying person's transition. They're not experiencing a trauma. They're not experiencing a direct threat to their life. The impact in that way is less. And that doesn't mean that the transformation is less for the SDE experiencer. I think it's less when you consider the physical challenges that so many NDEers have to come back and deal with because they've had a severe brush with death that's compromised their physiology in some significant way. For the SDE, they're healthy in mind and body. They come back, and now their work is to integrate this experience, but it doesn't seem to have some of the overt negative ramifications that the NDEs have.
How about your NDEs? Were they traumatic?
Well, yes. My first one was a high-speed skiing accident at 17 years old, where I fractured the lumbars 4 and 5, and some compression fracture that went also into a sacroiliac 1. So, yeah, that almost, as my orthopedic surgeon indicated, that I was 1/32nd of an inch away from being a paraplegic. So that was and I've lived in some degree of chronic pain and physical limitation for most of my adult life. That's a significant trauma at the level of not just physically with the pain and such, but also at the level of identity. Who am I? I mean, I was the athlete prior to that time, and I never was able to regain that sense of strength and confidence and vitality in my physical body. It's really been a struggle to maintain health and ease of movement. So those are significant traumas. And my second experience left me, it was an idiopathic thrombocytopenia. For those who are in the medical profession, that's a crashing platelet, low platelet condition that is terminal, life-threatening. And that left me deeply fatigued and somewhat lost because and it wasn't so much, there wasn't a great deal of pain in it. It was more just low energy and a disorientation as my body tried to rebalance after the severe imbalance in my blood. So, yes, my NDEs were quite traumatic for me and quite impactful upon my life, and they remain so today.
Well, I mean, you were near death, but did you get the whole experience, sort of, the welcoming party, the tunnel of light?
Yeah. So my near-death experience, my first near-death experience, now, Richard, remind me, did I share my first near-death experience? I don't think I did.
The skiing accident. Yes, the skiing accident.
Yeah, that's it. So that's my first near-death experience. So, yeah, I mean, I did not have a welcoming party in mind at all, which is, I mean, it's not so much every SDE, every NDE is unique. So to say that, wow, I didn't have a full NDE, well, that's not true at all. I had a rather full NDE, but I didn't have a welcoming party, and the only elevated being I saw or felt was what I would call God, the ultimate source, which I was negotiating for my life with. So, in terms of whether I could come back or not. So, yeah. Help me out. Am I answering the question here?
Yes, absolutely. How did that negotiation go? I mean, what did you put on the table?
Well, I just said I wanted to come back because I really, unlike so many near-death experiencers, I felt like I hadn't completed what I incarnated to do in this life. And even though I was 17 years old, that was the one thing I was clear about, was that I did not complete my mission, if you will. I wanted to come back and do something. I don't know what it was, but I also had the sense that I knew that I'd have to come back and incarnate again, and I said, I don't want to do those childhood years again. So I had a sense that a lot of my, reason for being on that lifetime was coming up for me. I was preparing for the work of my life, if you will. And I didn't want to go through childhood again if, in fact, I was leaving at that point, dying at that point, leaving that life, and then would have to come back again and somehow recreate the conditions to pursue or complete that life mission. And you're hearing a lot about my kind of cosmological views, if you will, my theological, philosophical views on the purpose and meaning of a human life. But it seemed pretty clear to me in that point that when we come to this earth or this human experience to develop, practice, have certain experiences, and I was getting close to those in that lifetime when I had my first NDE. And so the negotiation was not so much me negotiating as much as me pleading with God, let me go back, let me go back, let me go back. And at some point I felt this push back from the light. I was really in the light, comfortable. I felt the pushback from the light, and a telepathic communication make something of your life.
And in either of the NDEs, do you know whether there was also a shared death experience with someone close to you?
No, I did not. That's a question that's never been asked of me, Richard. That's a brilliant question. And no, I did not feel I shared that with anybody. I don't think anyone shared it. No one ever came up to me afterwards or at any point in my life to express that I was with you during that SDE or I saw you there.
So if a person has an NDE and comes back, they wouldn't necessarily know that there was a shared death experience.
Well, that's a great question too. I mean, it could very well be that somebody could say, well, I was with you. I saw you there. And, this is the work of mediums who, there are more than just mediums that can do this. But I have talked to people mediums in particular, who have said, oh yeah, I see that experience. And you may say, well, that's bizarre. They could see that experience. Well, they're accessing perhaps the Akashic record or something like that. I use these terms loosely, just not because I don't believe they don't exist. I use it because I'm not an expert in these in the Akashic records or other modalities of this sort that give access to lifetimes or these types of near-death experiences that are in another dimension. But I have had that experience where a couple mediums have said, oh yeah, I'm seeing that now. You had this type of experience, you were here, you were there. I'm like, oh wow, this is all recorded somewhere. So they're not having a shared death experience with me in real time, so to speak. They're able to go back and see what I went through, which is very compelling in and of itself.
Right. How do medical doctors, people of science, and I know medicine is also an art, but these are men and women of science, and some of them, are materialists. They don't have a spiritual bone in their body. And I mean, we've seen studies. For example, I think there was one in Switzerland where they tried to replicate an out-of-body experience by stimulating certain cortexes in the brain and said, "Aha! You see, it's just electrical activity. It's an illusion. It's the product of a dying brain or whatever." But the materialists that have these experiences, how do they try to explain it away? Do they have a narrative?
Well, you're on it. I mean, the SDE is unexplainable to the scientific materialists of today and medical sciences who adhere to that scientific view. To be clear, the hitch, if you will, occurs because in the modern scientific materialist view, which is dominant in medical sciences, is that consciousness is dependent upon and created by the human brain. So when there is human death, which is cessation of brain functioning, there can no longer be consciousness. So, or any continuation of any aliveness that would be identified with a soul, spirit, self related to that human life just ended. There's no scientific explanation for that. So for that community, these experiences don't have any credibility because they can't exist in their paradigm. But the problem, as we know, is in the paradigm. It's not in the experience. The paradigm is too limited. Now, this being said, there's plenty of research that suggests that, while I think 73% of Americans in the last Pew study on questions about religion and spirituality, one of which is a belief in an afterlife, like I said, almost 73% or three-quarters of North Americans and Europeans believe in an afterlife. And medical doctors, there was a similar study done in, I believe it was University of Chicago, I think it was 10, 15 years ago, that found that, 65% of doctors had similar beliefs. So, 2/3 of doctors believe in an afterlife. But they're able to somehow, though their personal beliefs, spiritual religious beliefs, don't jive with their medical beliefs. And I don't know how people, make sense of that. But your question about how the medical sciences and medical personnel make sense of this, I've explained. They don't. They don't have a model that holds this. Now, there are plenty within the system, that medical system, that acknowledge the limitations of medical sciences, and those are the people that I think are the doctors you want to be dealing with, and those are the ones that we're dealing with, because we need to find a way to make these experiences a part of healthcare, especially at end of life.
William Peters, pioneer in the field of the SDE and also the founder of the Shared Crossing Project, sharedcrossing.com, sharedcrossing.com. We'll take another time out, come back, and we will get to some questions from the YouTube live stream. Back with more in a moment. Don't go away.
The owners of the system.
Hey there, I'm hard at work on another edition of Inner Sanctum, my free monthly newsletter. Inner Sanctum features my monthly brief, a column of my thoughts and opinions on what's happening in the world. It features a spotlight on a past guest, a look ahead to an upcoming episode of my weekly syndicated radio program, The Conspiracy Show. It features a look at this month in conspiracy and UFO history, and my Conspiracy Unlimited podcast episode pick of the month, and so much more. To get your free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, delivered to your email inbox, just go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on Inner Sanctum and register. It's fast, easy, and again, absolutely free.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. We're now crossing a zone of turbulence. Please return your seats and food trays to their upright position and make sure your carry-on luggage is safely stowed. You're about to leave everything you know behind. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Strange Planet.
The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio.
So, William, there are certain people that have spontaneous out-of-body experiences. It's not even necessarily associated with trauma. They just, all of a sudden, they wake up and maybe they're floating above their body. Is there a connection between those spontaneous OBEs and an NDE and an SDE, a shared death experience?
Once again, you're spot on. There are these spontaneous OBEs. Most OBEs have some sort of trauma induction, if you will, but a lot don't. And there are people who can develop practices, and do develop practices where they can initiate OBEs. There's a whole, organization. I forget. It's Luis Minero runs a whole program. I forget the name of it. Something about consciousness. But yeah, they train people how to have OBEs. But there's not much, in the SDE arena. What's so profound about the SDEs is that, one, they're not very well known at all. In fact, I'd say that, my book, At Heaven's Door, is the most widely read and, clearly the first really research-based expose on the shared death experience, and it's only been out since January. But thankfully, the receptivity in the general public and even end-of-life professionals has been quite positive, thankfully. I think they're the same type of experience, especially when they happen, shall I say, naturally. I think there are ways that you can create, dissociative experiences, or experiences where your sense of self, if you were, that observing part of your consciousness is detached from your physical body, or at least outside of it, perceiving from outside your physical body. But I just think the SDE is a natural, organic process similar to the NDE that is invoked by usually some sort of trauma. I hope that makes sense in a certain way. Yes. But I'll tell you that there will be more research in this area, this whole understanding of how one's consciousness can seemingly have a perception, a view of perception or perspective that is outside of the physical body and looking back at the physical human body. This is a rather profound reality that needs to be explored.
All right, let's go to the YouTube live chat, and you're going to get a kick out of some of the handles here from the YouTube live chat. Not Gordian, K-N-O-T, as in a Gordian, not Gordian, asks, William, have you ever heard of negative stories of NDEs or SDEs when somebody saw glimpses of hell instead of heaven?
Yes, so there is a good deal of research on negative, or what they call distressing near-death experiences. And the author on that, if you're interested in the literature, is, I forget her first name, but her last name is Bush, and she just, NDE researcher Bush, distressing NDEs, you'll find her literature quite good. And she identified a number of types of distressing NDEs. It's important to note that the high number for distressing NDEs is, I think it's something between 3 and 10%. And she's up on this literature. I don't want to overstep my bounds here because she really is the expert. And she had one herself. And as a result, she did a great deal of research on this, and is, like I said, she did a good deal of research. So she's your source for that. But they happen in NDEs for sure. And even if you look at Edmund Alexander's NDE, when he had that was in a coma from a severe bout of spinal meningitis and E. coli, and was unconscious for quite some time, he had a part of his NDE where he describes what he calls the earthworm eye view, something like that, where it's dark and murky and confusing, and he's lost and it's stuck. He's stuck, but eventually that gives way to light, and then he goes into this really heavenly realms. In the SDE, I've heard, we've studied deeply 250 cases. I've heard well over 1,000 of these cases, and I have rarely heard a negative SDE. And when I do, it's a misinterpretation of the phenomena, and I help normalize the phenomena, kind of allow them to look at their experience differently, and they usually have a transformation of their view from, negative or scared or cautious to something more like, curiosity or possibility of wonder and positivity in it. Because it's so easy, if you don't know about the SDE, just to be freaked out by it. Because if you don't, believe in an afterlife, or you don't know what to do with when you see angels or elevated beings or have a life review or see heavenly realms, all that can be a bit freaky if you're of a more, mainstream mindset. So I try to open the aperture at which they view the experience, support them with the evidence that these experiences happen, and give them the feature list, and have them begin a process of re-examining their experience from the possibility that these happen, they're normal, and that there may actually be some positive gifts to be tapped from these experiences.
Any case studies involving someone on death row where, let's say, the person administering the lethal injection or, pulling the switch on the electric chair, have they had an SDE?
I don't have any cases of those. I do not have any cases of that type of, you're describing, and this is a death row type case, which is obviously tragic. Do have a number of cases, half dozen, maybe up to a dozen, maybe, of patients using medical aid in dying. And what's so interesting about this, Richard, is some of these cases suggest, I'll share one with you. This is a woman who was exercising the medical aid in dying in California, and the SDE was reported by a good friend in Massachusetts. That's East Coast of the United States, of course. And what the experiencer suggested or shared with us, we'll call her Sonia, and she reports traveling with her friend, Denny. In fact, you know what? This is in my book, At Heaven's Door, so the full case is there if your viewers are interested. But what she reports is she reports going to meeting Denny, having this huge journey across rivers and deserts, and then climbing ladders and elevating into the sky and seeing heavenly realms, finally coming to a party at which Denny is the guest of honor, not uncommon, and there's all these people scurrying about to prepare for Denny's arrival. But what's interesting, and Sonia doesn't go into this as much in the book, but I've talked to her many times since, because this is a research question that came up afterwards, after I wrote the book, was that, well, what's the possibility that she arrived early? And you can see this if you look into Sonia's account in my book. You can see that Sonia describes the people hosting the party as scurrying about, trying to get the meal ready. The guests haven't arrived. There were supposed to be these dancers to perform a dance for Denny as she arrived, but nothing's quite ready. And it may suggest that people that use physician to aid in dying or other tragic, unexpected death occurrences may arrive too early. In other words, and this challenges our sense that the people on the other side, these wise beings, actually know everything. Because if they knew everything, then they know when we're arriving. They know that Denny in this case had chosen to use medical aid in dying and was arriving earlier than anticipated, if there was already an anticipated time. But I have a few cases like that, which, to boil it down to the singular statement, suggests that the dying, when they use medical aid and dying, seem to surprise or seem to arrive a bit earlier than the welcoming party had anticipated.
That's interesting. Fascinating. All right. We'll take another time out and come back with more questions from our YouTube live chat. William Peters, and he is the founder of the Shared Crossing Project, sharedcrossing.com. We'll remind you about that online course as well when we come back. Stay with us.
In a democracy, we elect officials so we can sleep at night.
I don't need to tell you how important building and sustaining a healthy immune system is these days. And just in time, my good friends at Get the Tea are offering a special package called the Immune Builder. You get 1 month's supply of Life Change Super Tea. That's 8 bags. 1 bottle of Bioastin. That's 75 capsules. Now, Bioastin, or astaxanthin, is known as one of nature's most powerful antioxidants and provides a wide range of impressive health benefits. The Immune Builder also includes 1 bottle of Potent C Wild Alaskan Sockeye Omegas. That's 90 gel caps. And 1 copy of the book Natural Astaxanthin, Hawaii's Super Nutrient by Dr. William Sears. There's so much more than tea at getthetea.com. Get your Immune Builder right now. Not available in any store. Use the code UNLIMITED and all your purchases ship for free. The Immune Builder from getthetea.com.
The truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. The truth will set you free. But first, it will really tick you off. Welcome back to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Zoomer Radio.
All right, once again, here are the details on the Shared Death Experience, Transformational Journeys of Life and Love Beyond Death. It's a 7-module live online course presented by our guest tonight, William Peters, and the founder of the Shared Crossing Project, author of At Heaven's Door, and it begins Wednesday, April the 27th. Again, it's 7 weeks, so you've got April 27th to June the 8th, every Wednesday from 5 to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you use the code Shared Crossing, all in caps, and the number 10, Shared Crossing 10, you get 10% off that course. All right, let's go back to the YouTube live chat. And Renee Image writes, I had an NDE and I was happy to go. I even went through the tunnel and saw the light, but a voice told me I needed to go back. Does that happen often?
Yes, that does happen quite a bit with the near-death experience. They're often told, the experiencer, that it's not their time, that they need to go back to their human life and complete something, and or live out some the reasons I can't say exactly, but most people will say that they realized they had to come back to do something, to complete something. It seems like the human existence serves us in some educational way. That sounds a little bit dry, but there's some learning, some evolution of our soul spirit that we incarnate as humans to experience. It's a transformational process towards positive growth in a certain way, in an evolutionary sense. So if you're asked to go back, I'm sorry. I know in my clinical practice, there was a time when a lot of near-death experiencers would be coming to me to share their disappointment that they had to come back, that they missed the euphoria, the good feelings, the peace, and the absence of strife and suffering is inherent in the human realm.
Getting into NDEs for a moment here, the near-death experience, because they've been reported throughout history. But has the advent of anesthesia perhaps diminished or I don't know, reduced the number of NDEs experienced because of coming out of the fog of anesthesia? Perhaps people forget about them. Is there any way of even knowing that?
I think the comment you made at the close there, which is it's difficult to know. I think that's what is true, is it's hard to know what the advent of anesthesia, how it impacts one's experience or one's ability to remember their NDE. One thing that's really salient here is that Dr. Pim van Lommel did research, actually a fabulous research article. He's a cardiologist, and he did a study on NDEs and his patients and other patients receiving cardiac procedures, and he found that I believe 17% of patients in his study who received a cardiac interventions, usually surgical, and I do believe all of these included anesthesia, but 17% of them reported a near-death experience. And that article was published in The Lancet, which is a very well-respected international medical journal. And then Tim wrote a beautiful book called Consciousness Beyond Life, The Science of the Near-Death Experience. And that book came out about a decade ago. It's a spectacular book, I might add. So I would turn that viewer's questions in that direction, because Pim van Lommel looks really at the role of medical interventions on people's capacity to have NDEs.
The science of the NDE, that's interesting, because, does that suggest that at some point we will understand the mechanics of an NDE or an SDE? I don't know. People often, they talk about quantum physics. That seems to be the sort of the underlying, answer to everything that we now consider to be paranormal. But is there a field of science that actually believes that they can understand this, they can measure it, they can, come up with a formula at some point for this?
Well, honestly, this is kind of beyond my expertise. I'm a psychotherapist. I work with, persons typically at the end of life or in grief and bereavement who have had these experiences and need to process, integrate them, and make meaning of them so they can go on living with the benefits of these experiences, because they're typically referred to as gifts. And I help people, throughout that entire process, the dying, the survivors, everyone. But the actual science about, how these happen and why they happen to some, for me, a huge question, which I am researching now, is why do these experiences happen for some and why they don't happen for, and not everybody? I mean, why do some people have them, some people don't? That's a whole huge question, and obviously that involves, I'm not looking for a theory of everything, if you will, to describe why the SDE happens or why the NDE happens. I would love to stumble upon it, but my goal is really more how to help people have these experiences, how to help people integrate them into their lives, and to highlight for the medical community, end-of-life community, and general public at large, the real gifts of the SDE, the sense that, human death is not an end, but a doorway into a benevolent afterlife, and that relationships with our loved ones seem to continue, and that the SDE is a gateway experience into another type of relationship, not a human relationship. I mean, human death ends a human life, but it doesn't end a relationship between a human and the surviving consciousness.
Well, I might have to take another time out here. Pardon the interruption. But when we come back, maybe you can sort of just give us. We want people to take the 7-week course at sharedcrossing.com, but maybe a few teases about how we can increase our chances of having an SDE if we have, a loved one that's getting ready to cross over. William Peters stays with us from the Shared Crossing Project. Back with more in a moment.
Poking holes in the darkness. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio.
It's time to redefine reality. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Real inside-out thinking that will give your home that way you can tell all about it. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio.
Shared Death Experiences with William Peters. And we'll go back to the YouTube live chat. Joe asks, can deceased friends actually visit us in our dreams, or is that just us thinking and dreaming of them? Or maybe another way of sort of approaching that question would be, can that be part of the shared death experience is through in a dream state?
Yeah, so super question. And one that we, my research team is discerning about, and we have a number of, questions and frameworks that allow us to tease these apart. So you can have an SDE when you're sleeping, but it wouldn't be in a dream state. It would be a visionary realm of sorts. And I say that because people, when we ask them, will say, oh no, this was more than a dream. It was more real than my typical dreams, and it wasn't fragmented. It wasn't, it didn't have kind of the incoherence and people from different parts of our lives and distortion. That's typical dream life. These SDEs, as with dream visions and visitations, if they happen when sleeping, they're radically different than dreams. So completely different phenomena. Because of the clarity, because of the heightened sense of reality, if they will, because the people say they're more real than real, and so they're qualitatively different in that regard. And then in terms of whether they're an SDE or a vision or visitation, depends on the messaging in it, or the phenomenological value, as we say. So in an SDE, there has to be the sense that you're participating in some sort of journey. You're observing, you're watching, you're accompanying, or you're guiding. Sometimes you get called in actually to guide the dying along the way, but it's really about the deceased person's initial journey from this life into an afterlife. Visions and visitations are different. They usually have messages involved, and they usually appear right in front of, or in some way, to the surviving loved one, and they appear somewhat stationary. They're not moving. They're there. They have a message. They're usually presenting with some sort of identifiable clothing or expression or something that is known to the experiencer as validation for who this person is. So they're different. They're different in that way. But great question, and one we ferret out quite a bit.
All right, so I know this is something that you delve into in the 7-week course, again, at sharedcrossing.com, Wednesdays, 5 to 6:30 Pacific p.m., April 27th to June the 8th. Use the code Shared Crossing and the numeral 10, all caps, Shared Crossing and the number 10 for a 10% discount. And that is, how can you maybe increase your chances of having a shared death experience?
Yes. So what we have found in the research is that about 2/3 of our shared death experience research participants have some sort of mindfulness meditative practice. And that means they either pray or meditate or do yoga or a martial art or walk in nature. They have some sort of practice that allows them to both be receptive and attune, if you will, to their self, their surroundings, and to others. And also they have these receptive qualities that involve kind of a heightened awareness of their feelings and sensations, their phenomenological experience. All that seems to point towards an increased ability to have an SDE. The other thing that really helps is, this is a big part of the teaching I do when I'm working, when I'm teaching groups on this, how to have an NDE, SDE, I shouldn't say NDE, SDE or other end-of-life phenomena, is that you really work on your psychological or emotional unfinished business with your loved ones. Because that unfinished business, regrets, ill will, a sense of, bad blood, if you will, between people, unfinished business needs to be addressed, because if it doesn't get addressed, it serves as a hook to keep the dying here and to keep some interference in the clear spiritual communication between the dying and the surviving loved one. And then there's a number of other steps I'll talk about in this workshop and others about how it is that you essentially, if you're the dying, you learn how to maintain your consciousness through death, or if you lose it, how to reconnect with it, and then turn your attention to your loved one or loved ones in the human realm and invite them to join you in the spiritual in your spirit realm. And that's a series of steps. It's too long for this dialogue, but one that I do go into in a variety of workshops, most notably the Pathway workshop, which I'm not offering now, but my team and I will offer it next fall. But another thing is you need to know about these experiences. I say the first step in any training to have an SDE, I think you can have them spontaneously for sure, and most of our research participants have had them. But to know that it exists and it's a possibility, and to know a lot about it, and to know how you might be, what the phenomena are, the features are that you can be aware of if you're with somebody dying, or if you're remote and don't know someone's dying, but you end up having these features, then you can welcome them, and they serve as kind of portals to go deeper into this experience. really important data point. 41% of all SDE experiencers in our research have more than one, which suggests that once you have one, you can have more. So the gate here to get through is, how do you have your first SDE? Because after that, you're likely to have more. And I'm a perfect example of that. I've had numerous ones because now I feel like I know the doorways, and when that door opens, I'm going to say, yes, I'm ready to go. So a great question and an important one, so I appreciate it. But one other thing to say to your listeners here, Richard, is at the sharecrossing.com, we have a story library. You can go right to our website, go right there. On the story library, you can hear about 8 different SDE experiences from our research participants. They're short. They're like, 3, 4, 5 minutes, but they really give you an idea for the SDE, initially anyway. There's, the best description that I could provide was actually in the book because I had a lot more time to do so. I can provide a lot more background information. But it's, but I think if your listeners really want to have these SDEs with themselves, with their loved ones, what have you, it's really important to know about them, because getting comfortable with each of these features then will serve as a doorway, an entryway into the experience.
Obviously, we all want to live long, healthy lives. But do you now not look forward to death, but are you excited at the prospect of death?
My friends joke about this with me. They tease me and say, "You're ready to go right now, William." And that's true. If it's time for me to go, I don't notice within me any fear of death or any anxiety about death. I'm excited about it when it happens. The most important thing for me, and I would say to your viewers as well, is that we understand that we're here to be and do certain things, to have certain experiences, perhaps to evolve certain characteristics, virtues or what have you, develop in some way. Make sure that you get that done first, because it seems like if you don't, you might have to come back again and do it. And now you hear the bias there that might suggest that I'm not so excited about having to come back again. Well, everything I know suggests that the afterlife, in the spirit realm, is a lot more enjoyable than being here. Not that there's not joy to be had here. This realm has, as the Buddhists say, 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows. We're fine with the joys. It's the sorrows that get us hooked up here and stay, make us suffer, if you will. So I think my goal is to just live fully and hopefully have the ability and insight to do what I came here to do, which I'm feeling pretty strongly that the teaching I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing here about the SDE.
Well, William, always enjoy chatting with you. Thank you so much for this.
Richard, thank you so much for having me on your show, and it's just always a pleasure to be with you.
William Peters, Shared Crossing Project, and the website sharedcrossing.com. Don't forget the book At Heaven's Door. That's available everywhere, Amazon and wherever you buy your books. All right, that's it for me. My thanks to Ryan and Carlos. I'll be back next week with a brand new program. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There's nothing concealed that won't be revealed, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light. What I say in a whisper, proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.
Hey, 'tis the season to give the perfect gift. C60 Evo organic oil elixirs and facial serum sets. And here with another sleep tip is our good pal, Chris Burrows, co-founder and chief scientist at C60 Evo. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Richard, thank you so much for having me. My next tip regarding getting better sleep is related to electronic devices. So we all have these, this cell phone lying around, or we're using it on a regular basis. What a lot of people don't realize is that those devices give off blue light. That blue light actually tells our bodies, the only time naturally that we see blue light is at the peak of the sun. So when the sun is up at its peak at noon. And so what those devices do, including your computer terminals, your cell phones, your tablets, is they convince our physiology that it's the middle of the day. You can imagine that if you're watching your cell phone or tablet at 10 p.m. and you've somehow convinced your physiology that it's the middle of the day, this is not good for sleep. So it's really important. Most devices have actually blue light blockers, and you can just go out and Google and how to blue light block on my Samsung device or Apple device, or even on your PC or your Mac. Make sure you turn that on. I know people who leave it on all day so that they're never impacted by that blue light. I would recommend 2 hours before the sun is setting in your local area to turn that on. Obviously, it doesn't work if you're working on videos or you're working on pictures, but try and turn that on 2 hours early. And the other thing regarding electronic devices, try to keep them out of the bedroom. I recommend that you actually put a charging station outside of your bedroom so that you just don't even bring it in your bedroom. These devices, as we've kind of been reading and hearing, are like geared to trigger our endorphin responses, and so we like to be on them. They keep them up. So keep it out of the bedroom, and make sure you got your blue light blocker on about 2 hours before the sun sets. And I always like sharing sleep tips, because our most consistent testimonial for our product is that people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night.
C60 Evo products deliver noticeable benefits to people and pets around the world. Immunity boost, deeper sleep, just like Chris said, more energy, mental balance, flexibility, and longevity. Please visit the website c60evo.com/Richard-Serrett. And don't forget, use the coupon code EVRS at checkout, EVRS at checkout, and then you save an extra 10%. That can't wait. All right, Chris, we'll talk again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
A new Richard Serrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.